Hey, Joseph, will you tell me when I'm supposed to start?
Yes, hi. Thank you all those that are here right now. We're getting started for our first session. I think our presenter is here. So with 6:40 right now, Jennifer, did you want to start right now or do you give it a couple more seconds?
We can start right now. I'm always a stickler for starting on time, so.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So let me pull up your PowerPoint here.
Thank you. All right, can I go ahead and start, Joseph?
Go right ahead.
All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the College Fair, Bellevue School District's virtual college night. My name is Jennifer Townsend, and I am an English teacher at Bellevue High School. I currently teach juniors, junior American literature. I also teach the college and the high school classroom, the senior English class, as well as AVID. Next slide, please. I thought I'd start off. I'm not going to bore you with pictures of my amazingly cute baby, but who doesn't want to see pictures of a cute baby? So a little bit about me. This is my 8th year of teaching. I have a BA in creative writing from Seattle University, as well as a master's in teaching from the same university. I've had some essays and some poetry published in both online and print literary magazines. And we welcomed Callan, our first and only son, into the world on March 4th, 2020. So right when the pandemic started, we went into the hospital in one world and came out a totally different one. We also have 2 rescue dogs and 6 chickens. So my life is pretty full outside of school. Next slide. So I'd like you to take just, I don't know, maybe like 2 minutes. And normally I pass out paper and have you furiously writing to these, and then we all share. But in this virtual space, it's going to be a little bit different. So you can just think about these questions. If you love to write and you want to start jotting notes down, you're more than welcome to. But I'd like you to think about why you're here at the college conference. So is college important to you? And I say you, I'm speaking directly to students. Why or why not? So if your parents are sitting with you, don't feel pressure to say it's super important if it's not that important to you, or if you have a different reason for why it's important. What is motivating you to go to college? Maybe it is your parents, or maybe it's your siblings, or maybe you have a drive to go into a specific type of career, whatever the motivation is for you. For me, I will just let you know, my motivation to go to college was I didn't want to wait tables anymore, and I didn't want to end up like my mom with 2 kids and single and no education. So she became a teacher, but it was a hard road, and I did not want to follow down that road. So that was my motivation. What are your plans once you graduate college? So if you just take a couple minutes and kind of think about it, and then I would love to actually see some of your responses in, I think the chat is where it would be, I'm assuming. Joseph, I don't know if that's where it would be.
Sure, it's actually in the Q&A. There's a button
perfect.
on your screen that says a live event Q&A. If you go ahead and put those responses in the Q&A, then our Q&A host and moderator will take a look at those, and Miss Jennifer can also check those out as well.
Yeah, I would love that.
So look for the Q&A button.
I always like to give students think time, but I'm not seeing anyone putting anything in there. So
Jennifer, there is also a small delay between our live broadcast and when they see that.
Oh, great.
So you want to give a little more wait time than you used to when we're asking for these. Because of that, I think it's a 20-second delay.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
To get through all the systems, to get it to for the live broadcast. Yep.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, I would just love to see a few answers to any of these questions. It doesn't have to be all of them, but maybe one speaks to you. And it's just really good for me to know, and I'm also just curious. Okay. Well, I'm hoping, because I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A, and that's totally okay, but I am hoping that you're thinking about these questions. We'll go ahead and move on. Oh, love it. Thank you. College is important to me because I want to open as much opportunity as possible for my future. Oh, I love that. There is really a 20-second delay. That's pretty, yeah. College is important to me since I feel it's my best opportunity for success, especially in modern times. I feel more than just the education. There's a lot to learn from the experience. I totally agree. I love that, the experience of college. I didn't go until I was 28. I was a little late to the party. So I definitely enjoyed the experience of learning. Work for a few years and then try to go on to business or law school. That's great. It motivated me because I just like to learn. That makes my heart so happy. I just have to tell you. And I think that college is a good place to continue that. It absolutely is. Opportunity to learn more about the field of interest. Okay. And I want to go to college because of my parents. You know, my mom was a little bit of an inspiration to me. Like I said earlier, she was a single mom with 2 kids and no degree, and she actually raised us while going to school. So that was my huge sort of influence and motivation. Parents are a really, really big part of most people's journey through college. Engineering and more specific than high school, that's cool. And after college, I hope to have a sustainable job and open up my own restaurant. Awesome. Oh, I can't wait to go back to restaurants. That makes me so happy. To study environmental science because environmental conservation is very important to me. Ah, these are making my heart really happy, my friends. I just have to tell you. Keep putting those in the Q&A because I'd like to keep kind of going back to them throughout the presentation. But we're going to move on to the next slide, and then we'll have time at the end for questions too. All right, the 2 questions I get pretty frequently. Ms. Townsend, do they really read everyone's essay? And does the quality of my essay really matter? And then I immediately say yes and yes. Next slide, please. So when reading your college essay, you want to think about not only what you want to write about, but also what universities are thinking, colleges and universities are thinking when they get your application, your entire, application. So it's not just here's my first and last name and my address and my GPA and things like that, but they're really looking at you as a whole person. So questions they might consider, do they want to spend 4 years with you? I sort of think about it as, I don't know, long-term dating, if you will. They're really thinking, do I want to enter a relationship with this student for the next 4 years, or maybe, even 6 years if you go on to further study, and even beyond if you're going to be an alumni of that university. How is this student going to make our college or university a better and more interesting place? These are the things that they are going to consider and think about when looking at your applications. And does this student fit our school's mission and philosophy? So I think it's really important for students to read the mission statement of each university that they apply to. Don't just apply because it's a brand name or, I have to go to this particular school because X, Y, and Z things. You really want to make sure that your values and what's important to you align with that school. I went to Seattle University, which is a Jesuit university, and they part of their whole mission is teaching the whole person. So I was required to go to theology classes, philosophy classes I don't think I'd normally have signed up for, and it really did help me. It really rounded out my entire educational experience. So I highly recommend that you really look at the school's mission when you're applying for college. Next slide. And by the way, we're going to try to see where we can make this PowerPoint available. Some of these slides have quite a bit of information on them. And I did that in the hopes that this would be available to you later, so you could really take some time to read it, because I won't be reading everything verbatim on these slides. Things for you to consider when applying to different colleges, and I'm just sort of talking about applying to college. There's a lot more to it, but just some things to consider, especially when you're writing your college essay and how important it is. Admission does not rest entirely on your essay or your grades and test scores. They consider everything. So for me, for example, I didn't do well in high school at all, for a variety of reasons, but I was a pretty good writer. But there was no way I was going to get into college with my grades. There just wasn't. I ended up having to go to community college for a little bit and kind of make up some of those credits, which I'm really happy I did. And then I was able to transfer to Seattle University. But just because you're a great writer doesn't mean you're getting into your dream school. If your grades aren't great, and vice versa. Your grades could be amazing, but if your college essay is just meh, they're going to take that into consideration. So you want to make sure that you're trying your best with all of those different criteria. If there is a disparity between the quality of your essay and your grades and test scores, they may think you did not write the essay. I've actually had this happen, where students don't do very well in my class, and I look at their grades in their other classes. They're not doing super hot, but then they have this phenomenal essay, and the first thing I wonder is, what's going on? How did they come up with this? So you really want to make sure that you wrote your own essay, and that it's really, coming from that you really wrote it, and that it's coming from a place of originality, of uniqueness, that you're not just reading others and copying, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, okay? And then also, just please keep in mind that the essay is the portion of your college application that really is under your control. We could not control, for example, that we're in a pandemic. Some people can't control, and I've had this happen with students where they get really ill, maybe their sophomore year, and they have to be out of school for a while, and their grades kind of suffer because of it, or they have some sort of big life event that happens in their family that really makes their grades go down, or they have a large absence or something that they're going to have to explain. The college essay is the part where you really get to take ownership and maybe take on some of that explanation. That's what I did when I went to Seattle University. I kind of explained why I didn't do very well in high school. Here's how I kind of redeemed myself in community college, and here's why I want to go to your university. So, and then edit, revise. I cannot say this enough. If you go through this process and you do it carefully and thoughtfully, you will become a better writer. So I think that the value of the exercise of writing the college essay is of immense value. You can go ahead to next slide. So strategies for how to write an engaging and original college essay. I have a few things on here and some tips that I'll give you. And then hopefully I have also some documents at the very end that I'm hoping we can make available on the district website, but my email is on here too. So if you, for some reason, can't get a hold of this PowerPoint or the Word documents that I have, I'm happy to email them to you. So next slide. So showing versus telling, I'm not going to take a lot of time with this because this is something that usually you are introduced to in probably middle school. You've probably heard a lot of your teachers say show versus tell, but essentially this is really a time that you want to really utilize your writing skills that you've been taught over the years, especially with imagery, sensory details. This is not a time to say, my name is so-and-so, and here's why you should let me into college. I have this club and this GPA. That's not what this is about. Next slide. So here are some examples just of showing versus telling. You don't want your whole essay to be showing. You do actually need to kind of tell a little bit, but you do want to have a nice balance. So I was tired and couldn't move. That's me just telling you that. If I want to show you or give you an image in your mind, I want to put the reader there. I might say something like, the lids of my eyes hung heavy like wet bags of sand. I flopped down upon the couch, exhausted and defeated. Motionless, I sat for hours. The tick of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator mocked me with every passing second. So you hear there's a nice rhythm there with that syntax or the sentence structure. There's great imagery there with similes, like wet bags of sand. The word flopped kind of has that, you get that image of someone just sort of, just there. And it's much better to put that into your reader's mind instead of just, I was tired. So these are some examples. I'm sure if you did a quick Google search, you could find all kinds more, but next slide. Other things to consider, please avoid cliches. Don't say things like time stopped or my path to learning was long or I climbed the mountain. If I read salty tears ran down my cheeks like rain one more time, that red pen is coming out. I always try to push my students to really say what you want to say and be original about it. Next slide. Also, please avoid second person. Don't speak directly to your reader. This is about you. So you want to use I this, I that. Try different transitions. So instead of saying, then I did this, and then I did that, and then lastly I did that, you might want to try a little bit different transitions. Therefore, however, furthermore, and they sound academic, which is good because you want to show that you have different writing skills. So you're showing your creative writing skills. You're also showing your academic writing skills. Next slide. Also, please play around with sentence length, or syntax is the fancy word for it. Make sure you have some long and short sentences. It creates a nice rhythm, like that showing versus telling sentence. There's a couple sentences I just showed you. This is one of my huge pet peeves. It's totally okay to utilize a thesaurus. It's a tool, so please use it. However, and I cannot stress this enough, do not choose words you don't know or that sound off. And you can tell if they sound off when you read your work out loud. If you read your work out loud and all of a sudden you start to stumble on a word and you're like, oh, wait, that doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. Just take it out and use simple language. So even more powerful is using common words in unexpected ways, like my mother barked orders at me, right? So please try your best. And it becomes really obvious when students go through and try to change all their words so they sound smart or sound fancy. It's obvious, so just don't do it. Next slide. Do not tell your whole life story. This isn't, I was born on this day in this place and my family moved and then I went to this school. And that's not what this is about. You want to choose one specific moment in your life or something specific that you want to share. So you really want to narrow your focus, especially since you usually have a very limited amount of words to use. Tell your story, not someone else's. And this becomes really important. I have a lot of students who say, Ms. Townsend, can I write about my parents' divorce, for example? And I say, absolutely, you can, if it impacted you. It has to be about you. So, of course, it's sad when that happens, but is it the story you want to tell? What does it say about who you are? And this goes into this second one, or this one below. If you're telling a sad story, like this divorce really impacted you, you have to show your audience that somehow you took control of the situation and you don't see yourself as a martyr or a victim, so that you grew from it, really. As I said before, the college essay is not a resume. It's not a time for you to list all the different clubs you're in, and I'm the president of this and I play this instrument. They can see that on your application, okay? And then also, please try to keep it simple and unique. And we'll talk about that in just, I actually have a student example that I'm going to share with you, but really try to keep it simple and unique, and that falls under that. Don't use the thesaurus unless you're really using it as a tool and being specific. Find a story that says something about who you are. Also, other things that I tell students, as far as keeping it simple and unique, I have a lot of students, these are kind of my top ones that I warn them. I tell students they can write about whatever they want to write about. But I say, a move when you were in 8th grade from California to Seattle, unless it was really impactful, let's think about something else. Like I said, parents' divorce is a really big one, unfortunately. If it was super impactful to you or still is, by all means, like, let's explore it. Another one I find that can be a little tricky is volunteer trips or mission trips to some other country. I'm not saying you can't write about those things, but unfortunately, there are some people that take advantage of those amazing opportunities just so they can write about it for a college essay. And when that happens, which I've had students unfortunately do before, it comes across in your writing and then it becomes inauthentic. So just, I'm not saying you can't write about those things, just make sure that you're being really genuine when you write about them. Next slide. And Joseph, can I get I don't really know how much time that I have left. Or Hannah?
Yes, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. So I just wanted to read to you, and hopefully we're going to have enough time for questions at the end. But I wanted to read to you an example of what I've kind of been talking about. This is from one of my students a couple of years ago, who actually did go on to get, I think, a journalism degree, which was really awesome. But so you just have to listen. It's on the screen if you want to actually follow along. But I thought this was a good example of what we were talking about. Los Angeles, the city of angels, is the city of death. 2 times I have visited that cesspool of filth and forgotten dreams, 2 funerals I've had to sit through, 2 relatives I've had to bury, 2 eulogies I've had to give. Not a single tear was shed. My eyes remained as dry as the city my loved ones would lay in forever. I used to love LA, to the 14-year-old boy who stepped off the plane in the dead of August and onto the steamy, unforgiving tarmac. The heat embraced me like a fire in the dark of winter. The endless streets of greasy, loud Chinese hole-in-the-walls, whose decadent, mouth-watering smells of roast duck and hand-forged noodles felt more like a reunion with the homeland of my ancestors than just a chance encounter with a random restaurant in a crowded California suburb. All of the dust and the dirt, every grain of sand in the storied beaches that dotted the Pacific Ocean, the sun-kissed skin of the surfers, the pure bliss in the twinkling of the eyes of small children seeing Disneyland for the first time. Everything was so different from the cool rains of a childhood lived in the Pacific Northwest. I felt ignited, more alive than I ever felt before. There exists a saying, however, the closer I am to death, the more I feel alive. Within me, there was the slightest feeling of uncertainty. It was subtle, like a tickle in the back of my mind, the gentlest of tugs on my navel. Technically, I knew why I had accompanied my family to Southern California. I knew that my mother's eldest brother had passed after a devastating battle with cancer, a battle his body lost but his mind never seceded. I had heard the story, between my mother's sobs and my grandmother's strong, sad smiles, of how my uncle's body had failed and how he had fallen into a coma, but how his spirit had fought and battled and clawed until his family made the hardest decision of their lives. His legacy was his will to live and his courage to keep fighting, but death proved to be his greatest adversary. That was the only reason I was in LA. The cemetery where my uncle was to be buried was a beautiful place. The quaint gardens lay on a hill that overlooked a valley flushed with flowers of all colors and trees that whispered and swayed in the wind. There was a slight breeze coming from the valley floor, warm and full of loose leaves and cotton. A perfect day to go to the beach. I was sitting on a white folding chair in my best clothes, surrounded by crying relatives with my late uncle laying 15 feet from me, and I was thinking about the damn beach. My grandmother, sweet like the plum trees in her backyard that I would sit under as a small boy, was sitting next to me. My grandmother, whose father was killed during the Chinese Communist Revolution, whose sister committed suicide, who's had to bury her husband, was sitting next to me, crying. She had never cried in front of her children before, but she had also never had to bury a son. She hates LA. She hates LA because whenever people she loves go there, they never come back. I hate LA too. Everyone told me the eulogy I gave that day was beautiful. I nodded and hugged them, comforting them in their sadness. I tried to cry and to act sad, but the truth was my mind was far from the cemetery. I was still thinking about the damn beach. The significance of this did not dawn on me until I was much older. It was then when I cried the tears that I should have cried at my uncle's funeral. I thought that I had failed him and everyone I loved because I hadn't been sad. Yet, without me knowing it, LA had changed me. I had witnessed, perhaps for the first time, true strength in my uncle and grandmother. Their courage made me strong, their love shaped me, and their resilience gave me the power to live, not for myself, but for others. In retrospect, it is now obvious that a part of me also became an angel that day in LA, but I ended up with lesser parts equaling a greater whole. I love that essay for a variety of reasons. It's got beautiful imagery. It tells a beautiful story. It truly says something about who this student is. It gives us a little background about his family, where he comes from, his history. The writing itself is just beautiful. I absolutely, if I was a college admissions person, I would read this and say, I absolutely want to have a relationship with this student for the next 4 years. I want them to be part of my university community. And I absolutely think that this student would make our school a better place. And really, when you read these, when you write these, and when you read others, that's really what you should be getting from these. Next slide, please. And the next one. So I want to kind of appreciate our time. Just some tips on how to get started, like how do you go from, I have to write a college essay to something like that. So a few things, read the Common App and the Coalition apps, the prompts, or don't. Both applications have a write whatever you want option. Like you can literally write an essay on whatever you want. But if you're a person that likes prompts, I'm just going to say go ahead and look at them, but you don't have to. Start early and write often. I have a note app on my phone. Whenever I have an idea, I put it down, or I write it on there. Sometimes if I can't find my phone or something, I'll write it on a scrap of paper or a journal I have. But just make sure you're not going, oh yeah, I'll keep that idea in my head. It'll go away. So make sure that you write things down. Another thing, read, and read. Read as much as you can, whatever you can. I don't care if it's the back of a cereal box. Just read as much as you can. Novels, short stories, poetry, nonfiction articles, the newspaper, anything. It will make you a better writer for sure. And also, of course, if you want to find different college essays online and read those, be my guest. Go for that too. Go, next slide. And then I put these here. I'm not going to go through them, but these, and then the next slide. So I put the Common App and the Coalition app prompts directly on here in the hopes that you'd have access to this PowerPoint later. I also put the websites to each on there as well, just so you can get a feel for what you're going to have to write. Next slide.
And we're also going to work on posting recordings on our website.
Well, thank you. And then the next one. Yep. And then here's just an, oh, sorry. Can you go back just one? Sorry. So this is just an idea. If you've chosen maybe 2 of those prompts from either of the apps, this is just a way that you can kind of figure out what it is you want to write about. So you can you pick 2 prompts, brainstorm possibilities for each one, write as much as you can. And then you want to whittle it down to maybe you choose one idea from your brainstorm, write as much as you can. And you do this as much as you need to until you figure out something or a story that you want to write. And then you kind of go from there. The biggest thing that I'll tell you on this slide, because again, I want to acknowledge our time, please remember to leave your ego at the door. And I say that because you should be able to take constructive criticism from your parents, from your siblings, from your teachers, from your friends. You want to have as many people read this as possible because you want it to be the best writing that it can be. I also really want to encourage you to read your work out loud to yourself. You will catch a lot of mistakes and a lot of things to work out if you do that. It's a really great editing trick. Next slide. And do we have 1 minute left, Joseph, or 5 or?
The next session. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We have 2 minutes. So.
Thank you.
The next session starts at 7:20.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So these are also some kind of rules that I give my students around, especially the first part when you first start getting all this stuff out. Don't be afraid to just get emotional in your writing. That's kind of the gist of these different rules. Again, we'll try and make this available to you so you can go over it later. Next slide. And then these are going to be we're going to make these available. These are actual brainstorming exercises, and then how to actually structure your essay and some writing tips. And we'll try to make these Word documents available on our district website. The audience, I'm just looking at this quick question here. The audience would be, for these essays, are going to be college admissions people. That's what they do. They look at your application, and they look at your whole application, so resume and all the other things that go with it, and then they also read your essay. So I hope that answers the question. But realistically, whatever you write about, you should feel comfortable having a variety of people read your work. So if you are writing about something really sensitive, you want to make sure that that it's sort of redeemable, but also that you would feel comfortable having your teacher read it, having a college admissions counselor read it, possibly having your high school counselor read it, and so on. And then this other question, would sad stories or motivational stories be more impactful? I tell students, and this, there's a differing opinion on this, I tell students to write about whatever you want to write about, whatever it is most unique and says something about who you are. It's the way that you write the story. I've had students write about some pretty tragic things that have happened to them. I've had students write really funny things that have happened to them, and everywhere in between. It's the way that they write it. So, the essay I just read to you was kind of sad, but the way he wrote it, you felt sort of redeemed at the end, like he learned something about himself. So as long as that's kind of the ending, I say go for it. Let's see. I don't see any other. Oh, do all colleges have the same essay prompts? Most colleges will have either the coalition prompts or the college app, college Common App prompts. So those two, the ones I put in the slideshow, those are usually the most common ones. Sometimes colleges, especially kind of smaller ones, will have their own kind of supplemental questions where it's, a 200-word answer, a 250-word answer. But these are kind of the major prompts that colleges use. Writing about a crush, you know what? Again, I say go for it if it was impactful and you learned something from it. It says something about who you are. I think that's really sweet and endearing. I'm gonna say go for it if it says something about who you really are. I actually like that idea. Yeah. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, you're more than welcome to email me if you have any further questions. It's just townsendj@bsd405.org, and I really appreciate all of your attention. Thank you so much.
And for those just joining now, we have the next session at 7:20, and that's where the next sessions for all of our college conference start this evening. So there's a small break right now, and we will return at 7:20. Thank you.
Hey, Joseph, it goes from 7:20 to, is it 7:50? Is that wrong? I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so they're all 30 minutes each.
Okay, I had no idea. So I was like, am I talking too fast? Am I going through this too fast? And now, okay, I'm going to set a little timer or just kind of keep aware of the time. And then is it from 8 to 8:30 then, I'm guessing?
Yep, yeah.
Ah, thank you. Okay.
Yes, and for those of you that are here right now, you can definitely hear our conversation, which is fine because we cannot mute that. We're just getting ready for our next session. I just try to put the next break slide up there that we will restart at 7:20. And Jennifer, one recommendation as we're waiting for the delay with those comments, maybe reading one of the previous ones that you can then start speaking to, because they're in that chat a little bit earlier too. The chat won't go away.
Okay, so the Q&A that I'm answering right now, well, the people that put these questions,
No, they will not get those.
Oh, shoot, because I just sent one.
They would only get those if they're still remaining in the session right now. Then they would have gotten it. If not, then they wouldn't. So oftentimes what we want to do with that is have Hannah publish it first and then respond to it in the published queue. That's the middle tab for you. Because then everyone will see it that comes on. Little technical detail, and I learned that just last week. So.
Okay.
Actually,
Wait, so what am I doing
this week?
What am I publishing? Sorry, I missed that.
Jennifer, did you want Hannah to publish the questions as they're coming in, or did you want to read them like our last session?
Well, if she publishes them, I can still read them out loud, right?
Correct. They would be in your middle queue where it says published.
Oh, okay.
And then if you do reply to them there, it's everybody sees the response.
Oh, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. But again, only people that are in the session right now.
Okay. So, okay. So now.
And for those people just joining us here right now, we're just talking about a couple little technical details for everyone. We have not started the session yet. So we will be starting in a couple minutes though at 7:20. We're all learning the new technology now. Thank you for coming.
So, hey, Joseph, should I just keep it on published then? So keep it in that middle one, and then Hannah will publish them, and then I can see them as they're coming in. And if okay, I got it.
Yeah, that would probably work. Hannah, you think that'd work okay?
Yeah, I think that totally. Yeah, so as people submit stuff, I will publish ones that we want to read out loud.
Okay.
Sounds good.
right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jennifer Townsend, and I'm an English teacher at Bellevue High School. Next slide. Just like to share a tiny bit about myself. I always think it's nice to kind of personalize this since I do work in the district. And I have been working in the district for 7 years at Bellevue High School. This is my 8th year of teaching. I started out in the Highline School District. I do have a BA in creative writing and then also a master's in teaching, both from Seattle University. I also am a published writer in very tiny print and literary online journals. And I try. I haven't gotten something published in quite a while in the last year or two because it's difficult work, especially when you have a new baby. But I'm still writing, and I encourage all of you to write as much as you can, especially as we're thinking about writing our college essays. So anyway, we welcomed Callan. My husband and I welcomed our first and only son, Callan, into the world on March 4th, so coming up on a year. And he was born at the very beginning of the pandemic. We went into the hospital, gave birth, and came out to a totally different world. So, and we have 2 rescue dogs and 6 chickens living in our backyard. So my life is pretty busy outside of school. And they've accompanied me in a lot of my virtual classes this year, which has been kind of fun. So anyway, next slide. All right, so I'd like you to just take just a minute or two, pick one of these questions, and I'd love to see your responses in the Q&A. This is just an opportunity for you to pause and really think, why am I at this session at 7:30 at night thinking about the college essay? So is college important to you? And I asked that of students specifically, why or why not? What is motivating you to go to college, and what are your plans after you graduate? So maybe just choose one of those questions, and I'd love to see some of your responses in the Q&A. So there is a little bit, I've been told there's a little bit of a delay. So I'll just kind of pause and give you a couple minutes just to write, and then I would love to see some of your responses. Okay, so someone says, oh, this is great. College is important to me because it can help set me up for a career. Uh-oh, I lost it.
Oh, sorry, Jennifer. I'm publishing them so other people can
that's
see
great.
them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm motivated to get an education to prepare me for a science career. I love that. College is important to me because it can help me set up for a career, and it can also be a valuable learning opportunity. Yes. I think sometimes that gets overlooked. Like, it's just a place to learn, which I love to learn, so I think that's really great. Further study something that you find interesting, the kind of person who really values knowledge and the gift of being able to learn and receive an education. I constantly strive to discover more, and college will help me hone into the person I am meant to be, and will set my values well for the future and career in life. That is an awesome answer. Wow. I'm motivated to go to college because I want to learn more about what interests me. Absolutely. It's a really great place to do that, college. I went to Seattle University, and I was required to take classes I wouldn't normally have chosen, and it really, really did change my worldview and perspective on a lot of things. These are great answers. Keep them coming in here. College is important to me because I want to get a good job, yes, and make lots of money. I really appreciate that. It's assumed that my sister and I are going. Yep. Parents are a big either motivator, right, or sometimes pusher of college. But I can tell you, you know, as someone who I was the first person to graduate college and the only person to graduate college on my dad's side. So this is a really big deal for our family. So these are great. Thank you so much for responding. This makes my heart so happy. I love this. All right, next slide. So the two questions I get often, do they really read everyone's essay, and does the quality of my essay really matter? I immediately say yes and yes to both of these. I teach junior English at Bellevue High School, and I have for years, actually since I've been there. And so I've read hundreds of essays, so I definitely read all of them, but colleges absolutely read all of them, along with all of your other materials that you send in. Next slide. So when reading your college essays, universities, and this is something you might not have thought about, but when you send in your application, you're saying, hey, can I enter into essentially a relationship with you for the next at least 4 years? And colleges and universities kind of consider questions like, do we want to spend 4 years with this student? How are they going to make our college or university a better place or a more interesting place? And does the student fit our school's mission and philosophy? I really encourage all of you to read each school that you're applying to, read their mission statement. What do they value most? You know, like I said, I went to Seattle University. It's a Jesuit institution, and they value teaching the whole person. So as I said before, I took classes that I wouldn't normally have thought to take or sign up for, and I loved them. I took theology classes. I took philosophy classes, and they were fascinating, and I really appreciated the mission of teaching the whole person. So even though I'm a creative writing major and I took lots of writing classes, they also said, but it's important to also take those history classes, those film classes, the philosophy classes, and things like that. So I really appreciated that. Next slide. Things for you to consider. And I know that there's a lot of writing on these slides. My hope is that this PowerPoint will be made available on the district website, so you can kind of look at this at your leisure. But the gist of these is admissions does not entirely rest on your essay or your test scores and grades. It's both, or all, I should say. You can't have really amazing grades and test scores and then a kind of mediocre essay, and you can't have an amazing essay and not great grades. You kind of have to be the whole package, really, which is why you want to take a lot of time with your essay. If there is a disparity, so I'm looking at number 3, if there is a disparity or a difference between the quality of your essay and your grades, it calls into question your credibility. And what I'm really saying is they might wonder if you wrote your essay. So if you have okay grades, not great, but they're passable, but then you have this phenomenal essay, they might wonder, like, I wonder what that's about. They were getting, you know, a C here and then B's in their English class, then all of a sudden they turn in this phenomenal essay. I wonder about that. So please make sure, and I shouldn't have to say this, but I have had this happen a couple times where students have turned in work that was not their own. And in one instance, a couple of years ago, we actually had to call the college and say, hey, this student has a huge history of plagiarism, just so you are aware of this, and they definitely didn't write their essay. And it was a terrible thing, but people take that seriously, so make sure you're doing your own work. The essay on number 4, the essay is the portion of your college application that you have the most control over, so please take advantage of that. And what I mean by that is we can't control the fact that all of us are in a pandemic, right? We can't control that we're basically quarantined at home. In the past, I've had students who unfortunately have fallen extremely ill, maybe during their sophomore or junior year, and so they had to miss a lot of school. I've had students who had to kind of hit pause on school because they had to go get jobs and work for their families to earn money for food and rent and things like that. In your college application, I've had students write about these things, right? Kind of explain, here's what happened in my high school years. And, you know, so make sure that you're really taking the time to use it as a place to tell them about yourself, whatever that is. Maybe those situations don't apply to you, but you still want to make sure that you are taking advantage of the fact that this is you in your own words. It's not, you're not a test score, you're not a GPA, this is you in your own words. And I cannot stress this enough, edit, revise, edit, revise. If you put in the work, you will become a better writer. So I think that this college essay is just a great exercise in writing. You really, because it's a huge representation of who you are. It's kind of your introduction to these various colleges. And you're saying, hey, here's me, look at me. I'm a great writer and I'm a great storyteller and I'm really interesting and you should let me into your college because I'll make it a better place. So make sure that you're really putting the time in. Next slide. So strategies for writing and engaging an original essay. These are not the end-all be-all strategies. They're just things that I found over the years that are helpful for students. So next slide. Most of you see showing versus telling and go, oh, we've been doing this since middle school. I'm telling you, it is still important and still very relevant. So you definitely want to practice showing in your college essays. That would involve really using the tools that you've hopefully been learning in your English classes, using sensory detail to make your images come alive, you know, putting similes and metaphors in your writing, playing around with syntax. You want to show that you have these tools, right? But you also want to put an image in your audience's mind. And that was a question I got earlier in the evening was who's the audience? The audience that you're writing to is the college admissions, whoever the college admissions staff is. So that's really who you're writing to. But really you should think about your teacher reading your essay, potentially your high school counselor reading your essay, maybe your parents or your brothers or sisters or your friends. There's going to be a variety of people that are going to read your essay, but the audience is college admissions people. Next slide. So here's just two examples of showing versus telling, especially for those of you who maybe haven't been in middle school in quite a long time. I'm talking more to parents, but showing versus telling. I could just tell you, oh, I was tired and I couldn't move. I just laid there. Or if I wanted to show you and kind of give you the feelings that I was feeling and kind of create a scene, I may say something like the lids of my eyes hung heavy. So you're hearing that alliteration, like wet bags of sand. So they're using a simile right there. So already we're seeing a couple tools, little tricks that this student, you know, would use in their essay. I flopped down upon the couch, exhausted and defeated. Motionless, I sat for hours. The tick of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator. So we've got some sound or sensory detail. Mocked me with every passing second. So that's a much better way of showing your audience that you were tired and couldn't move. You can read the other one on your own later, but just to give you an idea, this type of writing is really important. These skills are really important in this particular essay. Next slide. Other style choices to consider, please avoid cliches. If I hear salty tears ran down my cheeks one more time, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I say this every year. In fact, when I teach this unit, when I'm in actual classroom, I write salty tears in really big letters on my whiteboard and then I cross it out. And it's because I want students to say things in their own way and in their own unique voice. Don't say things that have been said before. Cliches are cliches for a reason. Avoid them at all costs in your essay. Next slide. Also avoid second person, speaking directly to your reader. It makes the reader feel uncomfortable. It's sort of like I don't know, what do they call it, breaking the fourth wall or something. The only time you really read second person is maybe in an instruction manual, for example. You will do this and then put this part here and so on. Please don't use second person, really, in any type of writing, to be honest, but especially in this particular essay. It's about you, so use I. Me, me, me. Try on different transitions. These sound a little academic, but I think when you use therefore or however, when you incorporate them in your everyday writing, they become less academic and just kind of become part of your writing voice. Next slide. Also play around with your syntax or your sentence structure. If you are kind of describing something that was really scary and you want to create kind of an tense moment, you might use really short sentences, or maybe you want to use really long sentences when you're trying to make your audience feel a little overwhelmed or something like that. So just play around with it. It'll really help with your rhythm. This is a really big pet peeve of mine. A thesaurus is a tool, and I definitely encourage students to use all the tools in their toolbox. So excuse the cliche, but please, please, please don't choose words you don't know. Or if you do know them, but they sound really weird or off in your essay, when you read your essay out loud, get them out of there. The more powerful thing to do would just be use common words in unexpected ways. Like, and I put an example in here, my mother barked orders at me, or the window wept with raindrops. Please don't put really big words in there because you think you're going to sound smart or it sounds better. Generally, I can tell, and I'll usually say, did you use a thesaurus? And the student will go, yeah. Don't do that. We want to hear your voice. Next slide. Okay, don't tell your whole life story. Instead, focus on a moment in your life or something specific you want to share. Also, please tell your story and not someone else's. Really, this is about you. It's not, and I tell students this because they ask, well, can I write about my parents' divorce, or the time I moved in 8th grade, or my mission trip or volunteer trip to a different country? Those are your stories. They do have something to do with you, but I definitely want you, especially when I have students ask about, and I say these because they come up quite a bit. It's really sad when families, separate, but it didn't really happen to you. However, if it was something that was really impactful and you have something really, truly honest and genuine to tell about yourself from that experience, then I encourage you to write about that. And that goes with this, if you're telling a sad story, you want to show how you took control and you didn't see yourself as a victim or a martyr. And the college essay is not a resume. It's not a place to say, here are the clubs I'm in, and I'm the president of this, and this is my GPA. They have all that information. And then lastly, keep it simple and unique. So please make sure that you're choosing something that really says something about who you are. Next slide. I'm going to actually skip this part because I'm looking at the time. Thank you. Tips on how to get started. So in the next couple of slides, I don't want you to switch yet, but I did put them in here. The Common app and the Coalition app prompts. Read them or don't. So I've heard both. If you are the type of person that really likes to write from a prompt, then by all means, read them, choose one, and go for it. If you're not that type of person or it's intimidating, you don't have to choose one. And I say that because both the Coalition app and the Common app, which are the two apps that most colleges use, have a write whatever you want prompt. So you really can just write about whatever you want. They'll have a word length. I think it's like 650 words or something, but just choose whatever you want. Start early and write often. Do not wait till the last minute to do this. Please make sure that you're paying attention to your surroundings, because anything can inspire a story. Anything. Music, art, film, taking a walk in the woods, a funny conversation you overhear, anything can spark something in you, and then you write it down and, oh, that's a great idea. And with that, you never know when inspiration is going to strike. So make sure that you have something to record your ideas with. So I have my notes app on my phone where I keep writing ideas. Some of my students like to carry around little notebooks, and something happens and they write it down. The other thing I'm going to say is please read, and keep reading. And I'm not just saying books for school. My students just finished The Great Gatsby. Don't just stop there. I want you to read everything that brings you pleasure and joy, because I swear if you read, you become a better writer. I can always tell who my avid readers are because generally their writing is better. Next slide. I'm not going to read all of these. They're just here really for your information for later, but the Common App prompts are there along with the website. And then the next slide is the Coalition App prompts. And both of them, like you'll see number 5, submit an essay on a topic of your choice. Both of them have that slightly worded differently, but same option. Next slide. So for those of you who like prompts, and you want to look at those prompts that are provided for you, by all means go for it. And then here's kind of a way you can tackle some of those prompts. So my advice is maybe choose 2 of them and then brainstorm every possibility for each. Just write down a huge list of everything you can think of. And then you might want to choose one of those ideas and write as much as you can about it. And you kind of do that process until something comes where you're like, there's something there. I think I'm going to write about that. And you keep doing it. And once you've decided on an idea you really like, then you draft it, you read it out loud to yourself. I cannot stress that enough. Edit and revise, and then you start asking your friends, your relatives, your teachers, anyone who will read it, you ask them to read it. And then you go and you edit and you revise again, and you keep doing that until it is just how you want it. And you'll know. Students say, well, how do I know when it's done? I don't know. You just do. You can just feel it. You'll just know it's done. But I cannot stress this enough too. Leave your ego out the door. Writing is really hard. I think it's the most difficult thing a person can try and tackle is writing, especially putting yourself on paper, your feelings, your thoughts, your stories, yourself. It's so intimidating. But it can also be really liberating and just really such a joyous experience. And so, you know, for some of us, we cringe at the idea of someone kind of critiquing or giving us, you know, feedback, critical feedback. I welcome it. I really do. And that's part of leaving that ego at the door. No one's going to be perfect right off the bat. So if I have people in here that practice an instrument or play a sport, it takes practice. It takes hard work. Writing is the same way. You're not going to get it perfect the first time around or the second or the 100th. It takes practice. Next slide. And then I've put these in here. I have these in my classroom. I don't like that they're called rules. They're more like suggestions or guidelines. Essentially, you know, the kind of gist of all of these is write from your heart. I have a lot of students ask me, well, should I write a sad story? Nothing sad happened to me. Oh my gosh, I don't know what I should write. Just write from your heart. And where it says don't think, don't get logical, she's essentially saying don't write from here. You want to write from here. You don't want to write what you think people want to hear or read. You want to write what you feel that you need to write. Again, that takes a lot of practice. So when she says don't worry about punctuation, don't cross out, keep your hand moving, she's essentially saying just get it all out. You've brainstormed, you have an idea, get it all out, and then you'll have time to kind of edit and revise and all of those things. Stephen King has a really great book called On Writing. I highly recommend it. It's autobiographical, but then he also talks about writing and gives advice in a really great way. And one of the things that stuck with me was write with the door closed and edit with the door open. So you get all your emotions out and you write and you just get it all out with the door closed. No one's there, no one's pressuring you. You're just by yourself. And when you're ready, you open that door and you allow people in to give you that critical feedback to say, wow, I really like that part, but let's change this part and let's move this around. And what are you trying to say here? So please make sure you invite those people in to help you. Next slide. And then hopefully we'll make these links don't work, unfortunately, in my PowerPoint, but my hope is that we can get these Word documents somehow accessible. And if we can't get them on the district website, anyone can email me for them. But I have a brainstorming exercise to kind of get some ideas going. And then also kind of a suggested structure for how you should actually approach writing the essay, how you should structure it, kind of how you should begin, what goes in the middle and the end, and then also a lot of writing tips. And then next slide. So I recognize we only have a couple of minutes, but I would love to take some questions. I know I went through a lot of information really quickly, but there's a lot to cover and more I could have. So I'll just take a look at some of these questions and I'll just answer them out loud as I see them. So someone asked, how long are application essays? What is the range and max length? Usually it's about 650 words, which some students are like, oh, that's easy. It's not. Writing in that short amount of space is really difficult because every word counts. And when you visit the Common App or the Coalition app, they'll tell you, but normally it'll say 650 words. What are some compelling subjects, alternatively ones to avoid? I always get this question and it's a good one. You'll hear, depending on who you talk to, you'll hear a different answer to this. My gut and my experience has taught me that write about whatever you want. And some people are like, oh, no, I say write about whatever you want. And I say that because if you go with your heart and your gut and you go with that feeling of like, this is the story I want to tell, this is what I want them to know about me, it will come across as genuine, it will come across as you. And that's what you want. So, you know, I would avoid things that you don't want people to know about you. Don't conjure up something that, you know, if it's really traumatic or scary or it's going to put you in a really dark place and you really don't want to share it, don't push yourself in that way. I have had students use this as an opportunity to process stuff that's happened to them, and they've been really successful with it. So I don't think there's anything necessarily to avoid. And I do want to stress that you want to choose something where, if it's sad or traumatic, or maybe, you know, I've had students like, can I write about my eating disorder? I say yes. And I say that because, and I've walked students through this, we all have things that, you know, we need to work through and work on, and it's showing how you did that. That's the most compelling part. It's not the eating disorder part. It's not the, you know, I had severe depression part. It's how you dealt with it. It's how you redeemed yourself or didn't let it control you. How should you incorporate extracurriculars into the essay? Don't. And I say that because that's their application is for that. That's where you list all of your extracurricular stuff. They know that. They can see that stuff. Unless you're focusing your essay like on one particular extracurricular, like, you know, I helped my football team win the championship game and it taught me about, I don't know, teamwork or something like that, then you can mention that. But this is not a time to say I'm the president of this club and I'm in this, you know, other thing. Would a hobby that had a major impact on me be a good topic? Yeah, absolutely. Especially there's one in there. One of the questions is like, describe an activity that you lose all track of time with. That's one of the Common App questions. So that would be awesome. Yeah. When do you recommend starting the essay? Please don't start it when you're in 9th or 10th grade. That stresses me out when I hear that. Just don't. Enjoy your high school years, please. You should start it maybe the summer going into 11th grade. And when I say start it, I mean just think about some ideas. Junior year, I know at Bellevue High School, and I think most of the high schools around the district, you actually have a unit where you'll write your at least one college essay. But definitely brainstorm, definitely practice writing. If you want to practice some of these essays, go for it. But please don't start them in 9th or 10th grade. I have Miss Townsend this year. Can I still ask her to read my essay if I don't get her next year? Yes, you can, absolutely. And if you're a senior at Bellevue, you might actually get me next year too, whoever that is. Do English teachers at BHS offer critique to students' college essays? Yes, I do. And some of my kids actually, because I always warn them, like, listen, leave your ego at the door. I'm going to tell you what's great and what's not. So hopefully all teachers are offering critical feedback because we want it to be the best writing. How would you write about a sad topic but still make it constructive into an essay? Ooh, that's a really big question, and it depends on the topic. But don't spend a whole lot of time describing how sad everything was and oh, my life was terrible. You want to kind of give that and then spend the majority of your essay how you kind of redeemed yourself, how you got out of that particular situation, because that's the focus. It's not the sad thing. It's not the focus. Do you write a different essay for each college app? Not necessarily, because if they're all using the Common App or the Coalition app, then you can definitely, you would use the same essay. But generally students write at least a couple. Okay, so moving to a new country is a little different than like moving from California to Seattle. I say if it was very impactful, absolutely go ahead and write about it. Do the topics you write about have to be from high school, or can it be from middle school? I always tell students to avoid writing stuff from middle school. You want to make it pretty recent, unless it's something that's like ongoing. Like I had a student write about being bullied from middle school up until their high school years. But try to avoid like, oh, I was, well, I was bullied in middle school and then in 8th grade it got better or something. I would just kind of avoid that. The most cliche topics to write about. Well, as I said, some move that wasn't really profound or impactful. I've had a lot of students try and write, like force something. A lot of students ask, can I write about my grandmother who passed when I was 5? And then I always ask, well, why? I actually get that a lot. Grandparents that passed, and like, were you really close? Well, no. Then why would you write about it? So that's something I get a lot. As I said earlier, parents' divorce. If it was really impactful or it's still impacting you, then by all means write about it. But if it happened when you were 3 and you don't really remember, then don't write about it. I also, again, volunteer trips, mission trips, things like that. I haven't seen those types of essays in a while. They're great if it's like a core part of your life. Like if you do these, my husband went on mission trips every year when he was a kid. That's something that's really impactful. If you did it once and you don't really remember and you didn't really do any work and it didn't really impact your life, don't write about it. So those are some cliche topics. I think I answered all the questions that were on here. Please feel free to email me too if anyone has any additional questions or needs any more help.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of questions in the chat, but I know that we're close to the end of our time.
Thanks.
So I think at this point, just email Ms. Townsend and she can answer.
Yeah, please feel free to. Yeah, I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much and have fun at your next session.
And the next session begins at 8 p.m. The next session's due, including another one of this one if you're just arrived late, 8 p.m.
And hey, Joseph, I'm going to skip because I think it's pretty important to answer the questions. So I'm going to skip the first slide, or well, when I have them right. I think that was,
yeah.
I'm going to take them out and then just go right into my cute baby pictures.
That will work. I was trying to figure out why when I share my screen, it starts at the last slide, even though I'm starting at the first slide. So let me back that up. Here we go. So that one's ready to go when we get there. Okay. So let me do a quick. There we go. And Jennifer, when we post these, trying to post the resources, just posting the 2 resources that you have, or also posting the essay example?
I think you could just post all 3.
3? Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to double check with you. Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to read it again because it's just too. I think the questions are the most important things. But yeah, I think having a student example from like a Bellevue High School student or someone in the district instead of I found this random thing online, and I don't know, I feel like that can be kind of powerful.
Right. Okay. And the first session, we had 63 participants as a high. The second session, we had 108 as a high. And right now, there are 47 people in this room right now. So again, those people that are just joining us, we'll get started in about 5 minutes at 8 p.m. And those people that were still here from our last session, you can head to a different session, or if you want to hear this one again, happy to have you join us again. That's all fine too.
All right, welcome. It is 8 o'clock and I want to honor everyone's time. This is the Putting Yourself on Paper, How to Write the College Essay. And you won't leave here knowing exactly how to write your college essay, but my hope is that you leave here with some good tips, some good advice, and maybe some of your questions answered. So we'll definitely have time at the end for questions. But my name is Jennifer Townsend, and I teach English at Bellevue High School, so welcome. Next slide. Okay, so I thought because I work in the district, I think it's always nice to kind of personalize and just give you a tiny bit about me, especially since I'm a proud new mom. That's my son, Callan, and my husband, Jason. I've been teaching for 8 years, 7 of which have been in the Bellevue School District at Bellevue High School. My first year was in the Highline School District. I have a BA in creative writing and then a master's degree in teaching, both from Seattle University. I've had essays and poetry published both in online literary magazines and as well as print, very tiny, but still published. And then I'd also just like to introduce my baby. We welcomed Callan into the world on March 4th of last year, so almost a year ago. He'll be 1 soon. And he is a little pandemic baby. We went into the hospital with some murmuring of possibly a virus going around, and then left in a full-blown pandemic. So our world was totally turned upside down. Yeah, just having a new baby and being in a pandemic. Anyway, we also have 2 rescue dogs and 6 chickens. So our lives are pretty busy outside of work too. So next slide. We're going to skip this one because I want to make sure to answer your questions. So I'm just going to go over some information. A lot of it just comes from my own experience, as well as kind of talking with various high school counselors, a few college counselors, past students, doing my own research, things like that. So the questions I get most often from students, and I also, by the way, I teach junior English at Bellevue, as well as the senior college and the high school class senior English. But I've taught juniors ever since I've been at Bellevue, so I've read hundreds of these. And the questions I get most often are, do they really read everyone's essay? And does it really matter if it's good or not? And both of the answers, I always say yes. Yes and yes, it does matter. Next slide. So when reading your college essays, I always encourage students to consider, students have lots of considerations, but so do colleges and universities. They might be considering or thinking about, as they're looking through your entire application, do we want to spend 4 years with this student? So you're essentially applying or saying, hey, can I enter into a relationship with you for 4 years, and possibly longer if you decide to do graduate work there, or you're an active alumni or alumna, whatever. They want to see, do we really want to spend 4 years with you? How is a student going to make our community better, our university or college community a better place, a more welcoming place, a more interesting place? Like, what are they going to be providing us? How are we going to benefit from having this student on campus? And then, does the student fit our school's mission and philosophy? A lot of students I've noticed over the years don't think about this, but I want to encourage everyone, as you're applying to your different colleges, when you're at that step, before you do, make sure that you read their mission statement. Make sure you really are looking at what they value, and make sure that it aligns with your mission, with your values. So one of the things my family really values is education. And when looking at various colleges, I decided to go to Seattle University because they also very much value education, and their mission sort of centers around teaching the whole person, and that was really important to me. So going there, I was required to take classes I wouldn't normally have signed up for. And it was, again, because it was part of their mission of teaching the whole person. So I took theology classes and philosophy classes that I don't think I would have signed up for if I wasn't required to. And I'm really happy that I was required to, because I learned a lot. So make sure you look at their mission statement. Next slide. And I do want to recognize some of these slides are a little text heavy, and I I did that not necessarily purposely, but with the intention that this PowerPoint will be available hopefully on the district website, so you can take a look at it and really kind of spend some time with it if you need to. So a couple things for students to consider. Admissions does not rest entirely on your essay or on your grades and test scores. It's the combo, it's the whole package. So what I mean by that is you could have really amazing grades and really amazing test scores, but your essay is like, it's okay, it's not great. And they might kind of go, well, we've got this other applicant over here that's got, great test scores, great grades, and an amazing essay. They're probably going to choose that student, and vice versa. If your essay is really amazing, but your grades and your test scores are meh, it's going to be the kind of the same thing. So you want to make sure that you're really, trying your best in your everyday classes, right? You're showing up, you're doing all your work, you're engaging, you're asking questions, you're trying your best to keep up those grades without totally freaking out and focusing solely on them. Because I also want students to understand that the way that you present yourself in writing in this college essay, and then maybe the supplemental essays that some colleges might have you write, those are also really important. I also want to really kind of speak to this a little bit. If there is a disparity or a difference between the quality of your essay and the quality of your grades, there might be a little suspicion there. And what I mean by that is if your grades, especially like say they look at your English grades past and they are like, they're okay, but then you turn in this phenomenal, crazy phenomenal best essay they've ever, read, they might kind of think about your credibility and whether or not you actually wrote the essay. I've had students in the past, it doesn't happen very often, but once in a great while, I will have a student who had a tutor write their essay, or a parent, where it was very obvious that someone else wrote their essay, that it's not their voice. And you can usually tell pretty quickly. So just based off of other things in your application, if they don't match up, there's a credibility issue is going to be there. The essay, I'm looking at number 4 there. The essay is the portion of your college application that you have the most control over. We cannot control that we are in a pandemic. We can't control that there's, a crazy virus running rampant all over the world. That's something that's out of our control right now. We can't control if we get really sick our sophomore year and have to, be hospitalized or institutionalized for an extended period of time, and maybe our grades and our attendance suffer because of that. Those are things that are out of our control and that have actually happened to a few of my students. They've become really ill, and that was out of their control. Maybe I've had students who have had to put school on pause so they could go and get a job to help their family pay for rent and food and things like that. Those are things that are out of your control. The essay is the thing that you can control. You get to write about essentially whatever you want to write about. It might be explaining that illness or that kind of time you took out of school. It might be about something totally different, but just know like you're in charge of this. I also can't stress this enough. Edit, revise, edit, revise. If you put in the work to this particular essay, you're going to become a better writer just in general. The more that you work on this and you put care and time into it, the better writer overall you will be. I believe that this is a great exercise, whether you're planning on going to college or not. Just being able to put yourself on paper is really difficult. So I say work really hard at it. Next slide. So these are just a few strategies that I'll talk about briefly to hopefully kind of get you started thinking about what to write about, how to write about it. But by all means, it's not the end all be all. There's plenty of other strategies and advice out there. So next slide. A lot of you have probably seen this in middle school, starting in middle school, this idea of showing versus telling. When we say showing versus telling, we're really saying immerse your reader in an experience, immerse your reader or your audience in the world you're trying to create or the visual you're trying to sort of put them in. You want to put a picture in the reader's mind. How do you do that? Next slide, please. These are just 2 examples. You could tell someone that you're tired and couldn't move. right? I will probably say that to my husband at the end of this presentation because I've been working since like 6 this morning. Or I could go in there and say, oh, the lids of my eyes hung heavy like wet bags of sand. And we can see right there that hung heavy. There's some alliteration right there. That's a tool. Like wet bags of sand, that's a simile. That's another tool. So you're kind of doing a couple different things here. You're showing your audience, and your audience, by the way, really is the admissions counselor that's reading this. But you're showing them that you've been paying attention in your English classes, that you have these tricks, these tools in your writing toolbox, that you know what alliteration is, that hung heavy, those two sounds, and that you can actually use those tools effectively, that you know what a simile is and you can use it effectively, but that also you're invoking those tools in order to show you how you felt. And that's really what you want to do. You really, again, want to immerse your reader in the story you're trying to tell, and this is sort of how you do that. Next slide. Other things to consider, please avoid cliches. I've said this in the previous sessions, but whenever I teach this on my whiteboard, usually at school, I'll put salty tears, I'll write it, and then I'll cross it out in big red letters. And I say that because I inevitably get that in at least one essay every year. It's a cliche. Of course we know that tears are salty. I don't need you to tell me that, right? I want you to avoid cliches at all cost. Say what you want to say. You don't want to have, why say it if it's other people's words? It's not saying anything about who you are. So please use your own unique voice and say something that has not been said before. Next slide. Avoid second person. Don't speak directly to your reader. It makes them feel really weird and uncomfortable. And the only time you really use second person is maybe like an instruction manual. You will do this and then you will put that part here. Don't speak to your reader. That's also advice just in general. Generally, you don't really see second person very often. Use I. Generally in this essay, you're going to use I. And then try on different transitions instead of kind of telling them, then I did this, then I did that, then I did this. You can say stuff like therefore, however, furthermore. Thus you can use, but it sounds kind of silly sometimes if it's not, if it doesn't work really well in your essay, but that's another one to maybe consider. Next slide. Please play around with your syntax in an effort to create some rhythm. So that's just your sentence structure. Don't have all your sentences start with independent clauses. Make sure that there's a variety of dependent clause and then maybe an independent clause, and that you're really playing around. If, like, say you're describing something that was really intense, you might use super short sentences to kind of make your reader feel that way. Maybe you want to make your reader feel really overwhelmed, so you create a really long sentence with no end. So you kind of you really want to think about that. It's definitely okay to use a thesaurus as a tool, but I say use it with caution. Please, please, please do not use words you don't know, and don't use words that sound really weird and out of place. And you'll know that because you'll read your work out loud. That is the best editing trick. Read your work out loud. Go into a quiet room, read it to yourself out loud, not in your head, read it out loud. Because you will hear when those words sound funky or when that sentence doesn't quite sound right or flow right, okay? But please make sure, I'd rather that you use simpler language in a really creative way, okay? Next slide. Please don't tell your whole life story. This is not a time to give us your resume. It's not a time to talk about all the clubs you're in and I'm the president of this and I play this sport. They know that. There's other places in your college application to list those things. So you really want to focus on one particular, moment in your life or one specific thing that you want to share. Please tell your story, not someone else's. Really, please keep it about you. The biggest story that I get a lot with regard to this particular tip is, can I write about my parents' divorce? I hear that every year multiple times, and my answer is maybe. And I say that because your parents' divorce happened between your parents. If it impacted you, or it's continuing to impact you in a really profound way, and you really do have a story there to talk about, then by all means, go for it. But if it's my parents got divorced and that's a sad story and that's the one I want to tell and it doesn't really have anything to do with you and you're kind of okay with your parents and things are fine, then don't tell that story. Number one, and this is really sad and I hate to say this, but it has become sort of a cliche topic, but also you have to always ask, what does this say about who you are? And if you can't answer that, then you want to tell a different story. It's just like, if you talk about, well, my grandmother got cancer or my grandmother got really sick. If your grandmother was really close and you ended up having to help take care of her, then by all means, tell that story. I've actually had students do that. But if it didn't really impact you very much and you're just saying it because it's a sad story, that's not what you want to tell. Okay, next slide. And then keep going. So just a few things, how do I actually kind of go about starting this? My number one, and actually don't move the slides yet, but there's 2 slides in here that actually have all of the college, the Common App prompts and the Coalition app prompts. Most colleges and universities will use one of these 2 applications. So you'll hear a lot of universities say, oh, we use the Common App prompts. So, there's maybe, I don't remember how many there are, 8 or something like that, prompts that you can choose from. Coalition app, I think, has 5 or 6. So some colleges use the Coalition app. The majority of schools will use one of these 2. Some smaller universities might have their own, or art schools or liberal arts schools, things like that. They might have their own applications or supplemental questions, but generally these are the 2 that I usually see students use. And I say you can look at those prompts, absolutely, or not. And I say or not because each has an option where you can write whatever you want to write. Like you can write an essay on whatever topic you choose. So again, you can use those prompts, but you don't necessarily need to. Please start early and write often. And when I say early, I don't mean 9th grade. So if I have 9th graders in here, don't worry about your college essay right now. Just don't. Just enjoy being in 9th grade. If you're in 10th grade, just enjoy being in 10th grade. Just love being a sophomore. You got this. You have time. When you are in the summer going into your junior year, enjoy that summer. And I kid you not, please enjoy that summer because when you get into junior year, all of a sudden all my kids go like this because all of a sudden they have to start worrying about all this stuff. So just worry about it then and let your teachers worry about it too, and your high school counselors and potentially your parents if they're able to help you write these essays. So what I mean by worry about it is have them worry about it with you. Have them work with you and help you. Reach out for help when you start this process, but please don't start it too early. I also say that because a lot of students will ask, can I write about something that happened in middle school? No. Why would you write about something that happened in middle school when you are in high school? That's sort of questionable. It's like, well, what has been happening these last several years? Stuff has been happening to you. So make sure that whatever you're going to write about is current, is usually my advice. Please make sure that you are really aware of your surroundings. And I don't just mean literally look around you. I also mean listen to the music that's around you. Pay attention when you're out in nature. Pay attention to, if you're out somewhere and you hear a funny conversation. You're looking at a piece of art. You're watching a documentary. I don't know, you look at an old photograph or whatever. Pay attention to all the things around you and keep a place where you can keep your ideas in. If you do those couple of things, so I have an app, the Notes app on my phone, and I take notes on there when something, an inspiration strikes, because you never know where inspiration is going to come from for your college essay or any writing for that matter. I remember I was at a bar, I'm over 21, and I got this idea. I was reading a book, just sitting by myself. And I was reading a book and I was kind of looking around and all of a sudden I had this awesome idea for an essay and I didn't have my phone on me because I really don't care about it and I didn't have anything to write with. So I looked in my bag, guess what I had? Paper plates in my bag. Paper plates. I wrote an entire essay on paper plates because I didn't have anything else to write on. So please don't be stuck in that position. Make sure you take something with you because you literally never know when inspiration is going to strike. And you will forget it, trust me. If you're like, oh, I'll remember it, you won't. Also, read. Just keep reading. Don't just read The Great Gatsby if you're a junior and your teacher told you to. Don't read Night because your ninth grade teacher told you to and that's the only thing you read. Read those plus a million other books and, you know, a million other newspaper articles and poems and listen to songs and just read. I cannot stress that enough. The more you read, the better writer you'll be. Next slide. And then I put these here. I'm not going to go through them, but I put them here for reference if you want to look at this PowerPoint later. And then I also put the links to the websites too. So the Common App, and then the next one is Coalition App. So you can take a look at those at your leisure, but number 5, it says submit an essay on a topic of your choice. Common App has something very similar. Next slide. And then this is just an idea. If you are a prompt kind of person and you want to take a look at those and then you want to choose 2, I wouldn't try and answer all of them because essentially they're all the same thing. Write about whatever you want. Brainstorm every possibility you can. Just write as much as you can. And then maybe you choose one idea. Oh yeah, that time I don't know. Let me think. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. An essay that I have actually that I will provide on the district website as an example. One of my students wrote about a eulogy he gave. Cool, write that. And then if you have all these different ideas, you're like, I'm gonna write about that time I gave a eulogy at my grandmother's funeral. That seems like a good one, and I learned a lot from it. Yeah, I'm gonna write about that. So then you just write down everything you can remember about it, and some ideas will start to form. And then all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, I have a draft of this. You read your work out loud, then you edit, revise, and then you ask anyone and everyone to read it, and you keep going through that process. And then the biggest thing I'll tell you from this slide, leave your ego at the door, please. And I say that because writing takes practice, lots and lots of practice. And if you cannot take constructive criticism, you're never going to grow as a writer. So just like practicing an instrument or you know, playing a sport, it takes practice and it's super hard work. So is writing. So please just make sure you keep practicing and take all of that constructive criticism because it's to make you a better writer. Next slide. And then here's just some kind of rules I like to give students to think about. Essentially, what all of these are saying is write from your heart. Don't try and write what you think people want to hear. Write what's in your heart. Write what you really feel is gonna represent who you are and is gonna say something about who you are to these colleges. College is probably one of the most influential times of your life, and you really want to give them your best authentic self. I cannot stress that enough. Do not write something you think people want to hear. Okay, so don't write from here. You really want to write from here, and you'll know when it's the right story. You will, or the right thing to share. Next slide. So I'll hopefully get these to the district so they can put them up on the website, but they're just 2 Word documents. One is a brainstorming exercise, and then the other is a document around how to structure your essay, and then also some writing tips as well. So if you have some questions, I am happy to try my best to respond to them, and I'll just respond verbally as I see them in the Q&A. So if you have questions, we have about 6 minutes left. I'm happy to answer as many as I can. How do we work? It's for applying to specific majors. Just look for such reasons in the essay. Oh, that's a good question. How do we work the reasons for applying to specific major choices, biology or economics, into the essay? Do colleges look for such reasons in the essay? I'm going to say it would be great, like if you have a huge passion for biology, for example, and you really, that's what you want to major in, that's the field of study you want to go into, like, you know for sure that's what you want to do, I say go and write about it for sure. If you're like, oh, it sounds interesting, don't write about it. Like if you have like a true passion for one of these things, absolutely go for it. And you don't just want to say, I love biology, this is why you should let me in. I can't remember which prompt sort of speaks to something like this directly, but I know that both of the Coalition and the Common App have have questions around like topics you are really obsessed with or really enjoy, and you can kind of describe them and talk about them. I've had students that have really been into robotics and want to go into like computer science or engineering, and they've talked about like a robotics competition that they were in and won, and they really showed it. And it shows your interest without just directly saying it. So I hope that answers your question. If not, again, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to respond to any further questions. Let's see. The essay usually with the Coalition and the Common App, they're about 650 words. So they're pretty short. That's about, I would say, roughly 1.5, 2 pages double spaced. And some students are like, oh, that's so easy. It's not. Every word counts. Every word. I've had so many students that can write, and then I'm like, oh, it's way too long. We got to cut this out, and it freaks them out. So please make sure. That's why the other reason I say take your time with this. About our strengths without sounding full of ourselves. I love that. Okay, how do we write about our strengths without sounding full of yourselves? Be full of yourself. Are you kidding me? You guys are amazing. You're not going to sound full of yourself, I promise. I think too often we're sort of taught to sort of be guarded and, oh yeah, I guess I'm kind of okay at that. If you're awesome at something, show it. You don't want to say, I'm amazing, no one else can do this. You want to show it, obviously. You want to show your strengths. I would suggest maybe, you know, if you have a particular strength in a particular area, maybe you show with an anecdotal story about it. But by all means, like, this is a time for you to showcase yourself and your strengths. So go for it. Don't be shy about it.
All right, we actually don't have any new questions, but we still have about 3 minutes if people still want to submit a question for Jennifer to answer.
And if you can't think of anything now, but something comes up for you, by all means, you're more than welcome to email me. It's Townsend, TOWNSENDJ at BSD405.org. I'm happy to answer any further questions you have, or if I can help you find some resources, I'm happy to do that. I will say, students, you know, how do I know what to write about and things like that? You know, I will encourage students to go and read all kinds of things. I caution you about reading, you know, oh, these were the top 5 best college essays that got this kid into Harvard or something like that. And I say that only because I'm not saying you shouldn't, but every time we read something or sort of absorb information, it will have a tendency to come out in our own writing or our own experience. And that can be a great thing, but also not so great. So I don't want you to just go and read a bunch of stuff and then have it influence your own story, your own writing. Okay, if there's an event that happened when you were little, but it still changes you as a person to this day, can that be an appropriate essay topic? Absolutely. So a quick note about myself. I grew up I was homeless for a time when I was younger with my family. And then I lived in government Section 8 housing until I graduated high school. I also, you know, was on food stamps, and, you know, I wouldn't say our family was food insecure, but it was definitely a big part of my childhood. And it still very much impacts me every day. And so I absolutely think if there's something that was really impactful that happened to you when you were little, by all means, I say write about it. And again, it depends on what it is. I did have a student actually, she just got married. It's like blew my mind just the other day. She actually wrote about this really traumatic experience that happened with regard to abuse in her home, physical abuse in her home. But she wrote about it in such a way, it was so powerful and so beautiful, because she wrote about how she wanted to use that experience to become a teacher and to help students, you know, that kind of went through the same things that she did. It was amazing. She just graduated from college, I think, a couple of years ago. She's all grown up now, but it was amazing. So I'm going to say don't stray away from anything. It's really the way that you write about it, and it's really what you feel comfortable sharing is the other thing, because you have to think about a college admission person is going to read this. Your parents or guardians might read it. Your teacher's probably going to read it. They should be reading it. Your friends might read it. Your high school guidance counselor might read it. So you want to make sure it's something that you feel comfortable sharing. Okay. I hope I answered all your questions, and if not, like I said, please feel free to email me. Okay, thank you so much.